Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the neuroscience of feeling mentally stuck. That looping pattern of thought that can be so hard to escape. We're going to look at what's happening in the brain when this goes down and how a psychedelic compound is actually helping researchers figure out how to break the cycle.
I think we've all been there, right? But for many people, it's this debilitating part of a much bigger condition. This goes way beyond just feeling sad. It's this feeling of being trapped inside your own head, forced to walk the same mental path over and over and over again. So there's actually a clinical term for this. It's called rumination, and it's a core feature of depression. Researchers describe it as this kind of rigid, inflexible thinking. And let's be clear, this isn't productive problem solving. It's a thought cycle that just digs you deeper into a negative feeling without ever offering a way out. A really great way to visualize this is to picture deep, muddy ruts carved into a landscape. Over time, your thoughts travel these same negative paths so often that they become the default route. Trying to think differently? It's like trying to steer a wagon out of those ruts. It takes this huge amount of effort, and the wheels just keep slipping right back in. So what is actually happening in the brain that creates these ruts in the first place? Why does it get so stuck? Well, the answer might be in this totally fascinating and really important brain network. Let me introduce you to the default mode network, or DMN for short. You can think of it as your brain's idle mode. When you're not really focused on a specific task, when your mind is wandering or you're daydreaming, this is the network of brain regions that becomes super active. The DMN is basically the brain's hub for all self-referential thought. It's the me network. It helps us think about who we are, remember things from our past, and plan for the future. It's absolutely crucial for our sense of identity and, really, our consciousness. But here's the thing. In depression, fMRI studies are showing that this network goes into overdrive. It's constantly buzzing with these self-focused negative thoughts. The connections inside the DMN become really rigid, creating the neurological basis for those mental ruts we talked about, and trapping the brain in this loop of negative self-focus. But what if you could just smooth over those ruts, even just for a little while, to allow for new paths to be made? Well, recent studies are exploring exactly that, a kind of neurological reset. In these very carefully controlled medical settings, researchers are studying psilocybin. That's the active compound in so-called magic mushrooms. And by using fMRI scans, they're getting a real-time look at what happens to the default mode network during a session. And the scans show this absolutely dramatic shift. That overactive DMN, it suddenly quiets way down. Its activity just plummets. At the same time, global brain connectivity goes up. The brain enters what researchers call a state of unrestrained cognition, which is a total contrast to the stuck cognition of depression. And here's the key part. With the DMN's rigid control loosened up, parts of the brain that don't normally talk to each other suddenly start firing together. If we go back to our analogy, it's like a fresh snowfall has just blanketed the entire landscape. The old ruts are smoothed over, making it possible to create brand new tracks and forge new connections. The incredible part is that these effects aren't just temporary. They seem to create this window of opportunity, a chance for lasting change and building a whole new way of thinking. This whole idea is explained by a theory called the rebus model. It suggests that psilocybin works by temporarily relaxing those really deeply held beliefs and assumptions that constrain our thinking. The very beliefs that keep us stuck in the first place. And you know what? The data totally backs this up. After a psilocybin-assisted therapy session, fMRI studies show the DMN becomes way more flexible and dynamic. It doesn't just snap back to its old rigid state. This increased cognitive flexibility, the ability to think more freely and get out of those ruts, it directly correlates with long-term reductions in depressive symptoms. It's amazing. So, the mental landscape is now wide open. Instead of being automatically forced down those old negative paths, the mind has the freedom to explore. It can create new, healthier ways of thinking about yourself and the world. The snowfall has melted, but the new tracks, they remain. Now, while this all sounds incredibly promising, it is so critical to understand this isn't magic. This is science, and it's a science built on a long, pretty complex, and sometimes controversial history. The human relationship with these compounds goes back millennia, from indigenous spiritual use all the way to the first wave of modern science back in the 60s. But that research was abruptly halted by legal restrictions, which led to a decades-long pause. before a very careful, rigorous resurgence began right at the turn of the century.
Early pioneers like Dr. Timothy Leary at Harvard were just blown away by what they were experiencing. This quote really captures that profound sense of discovery that drove all that initial interest. But the excitement soon outpaced the scientific rigor.
Yeah, a lot of those early experiments were later discredited. The methodology was often flawed, and researchers tended to really overemphasize the positive while downplaying some very real risks, like intense anxiety or what we now call bad trips. This led to a huge public and political backlash.
And this really highlights why modern research is a completely different ballgame. Today's studies happen under strict medical supervision with tons of psychological support for the participants. And even with these promising results, psilocybin is still a Schedule 1 drug, and the path to any kind of regulatory approval is slow and very methodical, involving small, carefully designed trials.
But the findings from this new era of research are, well, they're just staggering. In a landmark 2006 study from Johns Hopkins that really reignited the whole field, over 70% of participants rated their single psilocybin experience as one of the 5 most personally meaningful and spiritually significant events of their entire lives.
So this leaves us with a really compelling question. We're looking at a potential treatment that doesn't just mask symptoms, but seems to target the very brain patterns that keep people stuck. The science suggests we might just be scratching the surface of the brain's profound capacity for change.